I came home to find a demolition crew tearing down my house, and the HOA president standing there smiling like she just won. Diesel fumes in the air, hammers slamming through wood, my porch caving in. She looked right at me and said, "You abandoned it, Mr. Dawson. We're reclaiming it for safety reasons. Would you have called the cops or done what I did?" Comment below. Tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever had an HOA nightmare, I want to hear it. Because what I did next, it started a war. 6 months earlier, I'd bought what everyone in town called a lost cause, a lakefront mansion, Ravenwood Estate, built in 1926 on Lake Marin, Wisconsin. It was falling apart, cracked foundation, boarded windows, squirrels living in the attic. But to me, it was a dream. I'd spent 20 years in the Army Engineers, built bridges in Iraq, airfields in Afghanistan. I can rebuild anything. But after an injury wrecked my knee, they retired me at 45. Pension's good, pride's better, but sitting still was killing me. So when I saw Ravenwood listed at auction, 6 bedrooms, private dock, 2 acres, I knew it was mine. I won it for $121,000. The whole town thought I was crazy. Even my daughter said, "Dad, that house looks haunted." But I didn't care. My grandmother raised me in a cramped apartment and used to tape magazine photos of lake houses inside her closet. She'd whisper, "One day, kiddo, we'll have a place like that." She never did. So I was going to build it for her, even if she wasn't around to see it. The first day I stepped inside, the smell hit me. Wet plaster, mold, rot. But sunlight broke through a cracked window and landed on this massive oak staircase, hand-carved, curved, beautiful even under the dust. I ran my hand along the rail, and for the first time since my injury, I felt purpose. I mapped out 18 months of work, foundation, roof, electrical flooring, all on my own dime. Every swing of the hammer felt like life coming back into the place. And then one afternoon, a silver Mercedes rolled into my gravel driveway. Out steps this woman, mid-60s, pastel cardigan, clipboard in hand, hair so stiff it could survive a tornado. "Mr. Dawson," she said like she already owned me, "I'm Linda Carver, president of the Lake Marin Shores HOA. We need to discuss your violations." I laughed, genuinely confused. "Ma'am, this house isn't in an HOA." She smiled, slow and sharp. "Oh, sweetheart, it is now. Paperwork was updated in 2004. You bought in, whether you knew it or not." And then she turned, heels clicking back to her Mercedes like she was allergic to gravel. No goodbye, no handshake, just power. That night I pulled the deed again. Nothing about an HOA, nothing about covenants or amendments. But the next morning I found a red tag nailed to my door. Stop work order, no warning, no inspection, just shut down. I called the county office. They said my permits were under review due to HOA complaints. HOA complaints that didn't even legally exist. I drove back out to the property that evening, just to clear my head, to think. The lake was calm, the house dark, the stars out, and that's when I heard engines. Headlights rolled up the drive. 5 trucks, bright yellow vests, men with crowbars and helmets. One of them yelled, "We've got orders to start demo." I stepped out of my truck, heart pounding. "You've got what?" The lead foreman pointed to a clipboard. "Work order from Lake Marin Shores HOA, structure condemned, authorized by President Linda Carver." I froze. The woman had actually done it. Declared my property abandoned while I was gone working. Diesel engines roared, wood splintered. My staircase, the one I'd spent weeks cleaning, shattered to pieces on the lawn. And Linda, she was standing there at the edge of the driveway, arms folded, smiling like it was Christmas morning. That's when I realized she didn't want my compliance. She wanted my house. So I did the only thing a stubborn old soldier knows how to do. I fought back. And you won't believe what I found when I started digging. Before I tell you how I fought back, you need to understand why I fought so hard in the first place. Because this wasn't just a house, it was a promise. One I made a long time ago to a woman who never got to see it come true. If you've ever chased a dream that everyone said was impossible, Hit that like button and tell me in the comments what kept you going. I spent 20 years in the Army Corps of Engineers, the kind of work that builds character or breaks you trying. Airfields in the desert, bridges in flood zones, hard, dirty, honest work. Then one day, a training explosion left my left knee full of shrapnel and my career over. They called it medical retirement. I called it not ready to quit. I moved back to Wisconsin with a limp, a pension, and too much pride to sit around. I took side jobs, decks, remodels, whatever paid enough to keep the lights on. But at night, I'd sit at my kitchen table scrolling real estate listings, like other guys scroll dating apps, searching for something that felt right. Then one random Tuesday, I found it. Ravenwood Estate. Foreclosed, boarded up, forgotten. A 1926 lake mansion on Lake Marin, 2 acres, 6 bedrooms, 200 feet of shoreline. Starting bid, $121,000. The pictures looked like a horror movie. Broken windows, vines climbing through the roof, raccoons living in the attic. But under all that ruin, I saw beauty. Solid oak beams, stone fireplace, hand-carved railings. You could tell it was built with love, back when people still cared about craftsmanship. My daughter thought I'd lost it. Dad, that's not a fixer-upper. That's a lawsuit. Maybe she was right, but it didn't matter. I wasn't just buying a house, I was buying a memory. See, my grandmother, Lila, raised me in a 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. She cleaned offices for a living, came home tired, hands cracked from bleach. But every night before bed, she'd show me a magazine clipping she'd taped inside her closet door. A white house on a blue lake, with a big porch and a dock stretching out into the water. She'd whisper, "One day, kiddo. One day we'll have a place like that." She never did. She died when I was 23. But when I saw Ravenwood, it was like her dream reached out through that screen and grabbed me by the collar. I went all in, drained my savings, sold my truck, took a rehab loan from the VA. When the auctioneer's hammer hit the table, I didn't just buy a house, I bought her promise. The first time I stepped inside, my boots crunched over glass. The air smelled like wet plaster and something long dead. Sunlight poured through broken shutters and hit the staircase. That same oak staircase I'd later find in splinters. I ran my hand along the rail and said out loud, "We did it, Grandma." I had everything planned out. Foundation by fall, roof before snow, electrical in spring, finish work by next summer. I wasn't rich, but I was determined. Every nail, every board, every bruise, I earned it. And for a while it felt like things were finally turning around. Then 3 weeks in, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. A shiny silver Mercedes rolled up and stopped just shy of my work zone. Out stepped a woman who looked like she'd never lifted anything heavier than a latte. Perfect hair, pastel cardigan, clipboard clutched like a weapon. She smiled, but her eyes didn't. "Mr. Dawson," she said in a tone that made my name sound like an accusation. "I'm Linda Carver, president of the Lake Marin Shores Homeowners Association. We have some serious concerns about your property." I blinked. "Ma'am, I don't think I'm in your HOA. Her smile widened, all teeth. "Oh, you are now. The subdivision was expanded in 2004. Paperwork's on file. You'll need to submit plans for architectural review. 30 days, or we'll pursue enforcement." "Enforcement," I repeated like an idiot. She gave a little shrug. "We just want to keep our community consistent." Then she turned and walked back to her Mercedes, careful not to let her designer shoes touch the gravel. I stood there, hammer in hand, watching her drive away, feeling that strange sinking weight in my chest, the kind you get right before a storm hits. Something in her tone, her confidence, the way she said our community. I didn't know it yet, but that woman had just declared war on me. And if I'd known what she was planning next, the lies, the sabotage, the things she'd do to drive me out, I might have walked away that day. But I didn't. And that mistake nearly cost me everything. A week after that first friendly visit, I got a letter in the mail from the Lake Marin Shores HOA Architectural Board. 32 pages of violations, unapproved materials, unauthorized color schemes, improper fencing height. Half of them didn't even make sense. I didn't have a fence. I called the number at the bottom, no answer. Emailed the compliance officer, auto reply. 2 days later, I found a bright red notice stapled to my front door. Work stop order. Property under review. Do not enter, no signature, just an HOA seal. I drove straight to the county building office. The clerk pulled up my permit and frowned. Sir, your file's on hold. It says your foundation survey is off by 19 inches. Off by 19? I nearly laughed. I had that survey done by a licensed firm. It's accurate to the inch, she shrugged. I'm just reading the notes, Mr. Dawson. It was flagged by the Permit Review Committee. I stared at that line. Permit Review Committee. Then I asked the question I was afraid to ask. Who signed off on the hold? She scrolled down. Vice Chair L. Carver. I felt my pulse climb. Linda had connections, and she wasn't just flexing HOA power. She was using her position inside the county planning board to sabotage my project. That night, my phone rang. It was Jake, my contractor. Mike, I hate to do this, but I can't keep my crew sitting idle. The job's shut down, and I've got bills to pay. Jake, give me a week. I don't have one. I'm sorry, man, click. By morning, the house was silent again. No saws, no hammers, just the sound of the lake outside and the creak of an empty shell I couldn't legally touch. Over the next week, it got worse. The neighbors who used to wave from their porches started looking away. One woman, I think her name was Phyllis, pulled her dog off the sidewalk when I walked by, like I was contagious. Linda had been busy spreading lies, rumors that my construction was unsafe, that I was squatting, that I'd scammed the auction system to get a property meant for developers. It didn't take long before I became that guy. The outsider ruining their perfect little lakeside bubble. I tried to ignore it, but when I got a letter from the county inspector saying my permits were under investigation for potential fraud, I realized this wasn't just harassment. This was extermination. I sat on the floor of that gutted living room, back against a cold wall, surrounded by dust, and seriously thought about selling, taking the loss, walking away. But my hand landed on the newel post of that staircase. Smooth oak, solid, cold to the touch. And I heard my grandma's voice again. One day, kiddo, don't you quit before the miracle. So I didn't. Instead, I did what I do best. I got to work, not with a hammer this time, but with paper. 3 nights in the county archives. Dust thick enough to choke on. Old maps, zoning amendments, microfilm reels that hadn't been touched since the 90s. And somewhere around 2 a.m. On night 3, I found it. The 2004 amendment Linda kept waving like a weapon. The document that supposedly made my property part of her HOA, except it wasn't valid. It was never signed by the county, never ratified by the state. Just a town council vote and 5 signatures at the bottom. Linda Carver, her late husband, Judge Carver, 2 of her friends on the board, and the chair of the planning commission, her brother-in-law. I cross-checked property records. After that amendment, all 5 of their lake homes jumped 30% in value. Meanwhile, the 5 excluded lots, including mine, were quietly marked for redevelopment. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about community standards. It was a land grab. Linda and her friends had been rewriting maps, pushing out old owners, and flipping the properties for profit. I was just the first one stubborn enough to say no. I remember staring at that document in the flickering light of a library desk lamp, my heart hammering. They'd tried to bury me under paperwork, but I'd just found their shovel. And the next morning, I sent everything, every forged signature, every illegal map, to the town council, the newspaper, and the state attorney general. I thought that would end it. I was wrong. That's when Linda stopped hiding and started fighting dirty. The next morning, I hit send. 18 pages of evidence, the fake amendment, the property records, the signatures, all of it, went straight to the town council, the county clerk, the local newspaper, and the state attorney general's office. I sat there at my kitchen table, coffee going cold, staring at the message sent confirmation on my screen. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from adrenaline, because after months of being cornered, I'd finally hit back. 2 days later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mike, the voice said, syrup sweet but tight. Let's not make this any uglier than it has to be. It was Linda Carver. I didn't say a word. She continued, her tone dripping with false warmth. How about we grab coffee tomorrow morning? We can work this out like neighbors. I looked around at my half-gutted living room. Drywall dust on the floor, cold air whistling through an unfinished window frame. I smiled to myself. Sure, I said. Let's meet at the next council meeting. Public comment period sounds like the perfect place for it, silence. Then I heard it, the faint click of her acrylic nails tapping against her phone. You're making a mistake, she whispered. Probably not my first, I said, and hung up. That night I installed 4 new security cameras, one for each side of the house. If she wanted war, I was done fighting blind. The next 2 weeks crawled by. I barely slept. Every sound outside made me sit up straight. I knew she wouldn't take this quietly. I just didn't know how she'd hit back. The night before the meeting, I walked through Ravenwood one last time. The moonlight came through the broken shutters and painted the walls silver. Every nail, every crack, every shadow. It all felt like it was holding its breath, waiting. The next evening, I walked into the Lake Marin Community Center for the monthly HOA meeting. It smelled like burnt coffee and cheap air freshener, that fake floral scent that makes your eyes water. I was early, or so I thought. Every seat in the room already had a glossy flyer on it. Full-color professional print job. Bold red letters across the top. Safety concerns at Ravenwood Estate, a danger to our community. There were photos of my property, zoomed-in shots of construction debris, a half-finished wall, some paint cans, and captions full of lies. Toxic materials, unlicensed electrical work, uninhabitable conditions. It was all fiction, but it looked official, and it worked. By the time I took a seat in the back row, people were already whispering. Neighbors I'd never met giving me sideways looks like I was some kind of criminal. Then Linda walked in, perfect hair, pearls gleaming, pastel suit immaculate. She moved to the front of the room and smiled like a politician on election night. Let's come to order, she said. And just like that, the witch trial began. One by one, people stood up to express concern. A man said he'd seen kids drinking on my dock. Total lie. A woman claimed debris from my property was washing into the lake. Another lie. Then her friend, a retired dentist named Ron, said, that structure's unsafe. I've personally seen exposed wiring. He hadn't even been within 50 feet of the house. I sat there, jaw tight, listening as they shredded my name. Not one of them looked me in the eye. Then Linda stood. Given these serious issues, she said smoothly, I'm proposing an emergency bylaw amendment. Her words echoed through the room. Any structure left unoccupied for 90 consecutive days may be declared a public nuisance. The HOA will have authority to remedy the situation, up to and including demolition, with costs billed to the property owner. She smiled. That same smile I'd seen the day my staircase was destroyed. This isn't about targeting anyone, she added. It's about protecting our community. The room murmured in agreement, heads nodding, even people who barely knew me. That was it. The setup. She wanted to rewrite the rules again, this time with the full support of the neighborhood behind her. And if it passed, she could legally finish what she'd started, tearing my house to the ground. When public comment opened, I stood. My heart was pounding, but my voice was steady. I walked to the front, plugged my phone into the projector and said, before you vote, I think everyone deserves to see a few things. The first image flickered onto the screen, grainy night vision footage from my new security cameras. Ron, the retired dentist, standing on my dock at midnight, dumping a trash bag full of beer cans into the grass. The date and time stamped clearly at the bottom. Gasps rippled through the room. Second image, water test results from a certified lab. 0 pollutants found near my shoreline, but elevated contamination from Linda's own rental property 2 lots down. Her address right there in the report. And then the kicker, a legal statement from my attorney. He'd reviewed Linda's proposed bylaw and written 3 words across the top. Retroactive enforcement, illegal. I looked at her. Mrs. Carver, I said quietly. I don't know if you're trying to steal my home or if you just can't stand the idea of someone like me living next to you, but I'm not going anywhere. And if this bylaw passes, I'll see you in court. Silence. You could have heard a pin drop. Then from the back row, someone started clapping. Slow, deliberate. It was Samantha Reyes, the reporter from the Lake Marin Journal. A few others joined in. Linda's face turned crimson. She gathered her papers, muttered something about defamation, and stormed out before the meeting could even adjourn. Her cronies scrambled, gavel banging, voices shaking. Meeting, tabled pending legal review. I walked out into the cold night air, the smell of wet leaves and gasoline heavy around the maintenance shed. For the first time in months, I felt like maybe I was winning, until the next morning. When I opened my front door and found a dead raccoon on the porch, neck twisted, eyes clouded. Someone had left it there, perfectly centered on the welcome mat. I just stood there, holding my coffee, staring at it, trying to decide whether to laugh or get angry. Then I saw the small slip of paper under its paw. 4 words scrawled in red marker. You should have sold. That's when I realized Linda wasn't done. She'd lost control, and desperate people don't fight fair. I didn't call the cops. That's what most people ask me when I tell this part. Why didn't you report it? Because in towns like ours, people like Linda Carver didn't need to break laws to ruin you. They just knew how to use them. The morning after the dead raccoon, I came home from the hardware store to find a bright orange envelope taped to my front door. Code violation number 1. Overgrown vegetation creating a fire hazard. The vegetation in question? Native wildflowers I'd planted intentionally, with certification from the Wisconsin Conservation Program hanging on my wall. 2 days later, another notice. Code violation number 2. Unsafe foundation exposure. The exposure was an open crawl space vent, standard, required by building code. By Friday, I had a third. Code violation number 3. Unsecured hazardous materials. I actually laughed when I read that one. They were talking about paint cans, neatly stored, sealed, and labeled in a locked cabinet. I'd handled actual explosives overseas, and now they were ticketing me for latex primer. Each citation carried a $500 daily fine. 3 violations, 10 days to correct. That was $15,000 I didn't have. I sat at my folding table that night, a single bulb overhead, those orange envelopes lined up like a firing squad. Outside, the wind came off the lake, rattling the windows, whispering through the half-finished siding. 15 grand. It would wipe out everything I had left. My savings, my renovation loan, my last bit of pride. And that's exactly what she wanted. Linda had gone nuclear, couldn't beat me in the open, so she was using every lever she could pull from inside the system. Code enforcement, fire marshals, county health inspectors, all by the book, all with her fingerprints conveniently off the paperwork. I stared at those citations until the lines blurred. I thought about calling my daughter, telling her I was done, but when I picked up my phone, a text came in first. It was Jake, my old contractor. Heard what she's doing. It's garbage. I can't do full time, but weekends are yours, no charge. You just cover materials. I stared at the message for a long time. Jake had a family, 4 kids, a mortgage. He didn't owe me a thing. I called him. Jake, I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking, he said. My boys need to see their old man stand up to a bully. Count me in. I didn't know what to say. For months I'd felt alone. Now maybe for the first time, I wasn't. 2 days later, I heard a knock. It was Elena, my neighbor 2 lots over. Nurse, single mom, the only person in the subdivision who still said hello. She stood on my porch, arms crossed. Mike, I saw who left that raccoon. My chest tightened. Who? Ron's brother-in-law. Drove over at midnight. I got his plate. I'll sign an affidavit if you need it. Elena, she'll come after you next. She laughed, bitter and fearless. She's been trying to find me for my mailbox color for 3 years. I'm not scared of that woman anymore. She turned to leave, then looked back. My daughter's watching, Mike. She needs to see adults fight back. When she drove away, I stood there in the cold, something strange building in my chest. Not anger this time. Resolve. That night, I got a call from Samantha Reyes, the journalist from the Lake Marin Journal. Mike, I've been digging. Found 3 other HOA disputes tied to Linda. All settled quietly, all with NDAS. Can't print details, but the pattern's clear. I closed my eyes. She's been doing this for years. Yeah, Samantha said softly. You're just the first one who didn't fold. That was the night everything changed. Because it stopped being my fight. It became ours. By week 11, Linda made her next move. A lien appeared on my property. $1,200 in unpaid HOA dues. Unpaid to an HOA I wasn't legally part of. She'd filed it with the county clerk herself, knowing it would tank my credit and freeze my loan. 2 days later, my bank sent a letter. Title cloud detected. Resolve immediately or financing may be revoked. That one hit hard. If the bank pulled out, I'd lose everything. The house, the land, even the fight. I called Rick, an attorney I'd served with back in the Corps, told him everything. Long silence on the line, then a low whistle. Filing a knowingly false lien? That's a misdemeanor, Mike. And she just signed her name to it. He didn't hesitate. Drafted a demand letter that same afternoon. Certified mail, official letterhead, the whole deal. It gave her 48 hours to withdraw the lien or face a criminal referral and triple damages. She blinked first. By Tuesday, the lien vanished. No apology, no explanation, just gone. But Samantha ran the story anyway. Front page headline, Local Veteran Fights Back, HOA President Under Scrutiny for Abuse of Power. That was the first time Linda's name showed up in print without her permission. And it broke something in her. That night, I built a fire by the lake. Took the lien withdrawal notice and burned it, watching the paper curl into ash. The smoke drifted over the water, pale against the moonlight. For the first time in months, I didn't feel scared. I felt ready, because I finally understood who she was, a bully with a clipboard and too much power. And people like that, they only win when everyone else stays quiet. But I wasn't quiet anymore. And the louder I got, the more desperate she became. Until one night, she crossed a line you can't uncross. By December, Linda wasn't hiding her hate anymore. She couldn't outlawyer me or scare me, so she turned to sabotage. One morning, I woke to the sound of tires crunching gravel, a code enforcement truck, then another. 3 officials stepped out like they were raiding a crime scene. Cameras, clipboards, the works. They took photos of everything. My siding, my lumber pile, even my camper parked out back. By noon, I'd racked up 5 new violations. Unauthorized structure, improper material storage, potential runoff hazard, all nonsense, but enough to freeze my insurance and delay inspections. Linda was weaponizing bureaucracy like a scalpel. That night, Jake and Elena came over. We sat in the cold, huddled by a space heater, surrounded by paperwork. I can't win this alone, I admitted. Elena smiled. Then don't. The next morning, she posted online, Rebuilding Ravenwood, because community means more than control. Within hours, people showed up. Veterans, carpenters, retirees, even a couple of neighbors who'd once ignored me. They brought tools, paint, food, and stories about how Linda had bullied them too. We weren't just fixing a house anymore. We were taking back our neighborhood. As the sun set, I stood on the half-finished porch, listening to hammers and laughter echo off the lake. For the first time in a year, Ravenwood sounded alive again. But Linda wasn't done fighting. And that night, she proved just how far she'd go to win. By week 13, Ravenwood was coming back to life. Volunteers showed up every weekend, pounding nails, hauling lumber, laughing like the place had always belonged to them. Even Phyllis, one of Linda's old allies, brought a homemade pie and whispered, I was wrong. For a moment, I thought the storm had passed. Then it hit. At 3 a.m. one night, every security alarm in the house went off. I grabbed my flashlight and ran outside. A truck sat at the end of the drive, taillights fading as it sped off. Where it had been, a mountain of construction debris, shattered drywall, broken tiles, and several bags stamped with hazardous waste labels. Asbestos. The smell of diesel still hung in the air. Whoever did this wanted me arrested, maybe even jailed. By sunrise, a county inspector and a sheriff's deputy were on site. The inspector grinned like it was Christmas morning. "Illegal dumping, Mr. Dawson. That's a felony." I took a slow sip of my coffee and showed him my phone. 4K footage, time-stamped. The truck's VIN visible under the tarp. His face went pale. That truck belonged to one of Linda's friends. And what happened next would finally expose everything. Within an hour, the sheriff's team had sealed off the site. Yellow tape fluttered in the wind while they photographed every inch of the debris. The VIN number traced back to Carver Landscaping, owned by Linda's brother-in-law. When the sergeant saw the footage, he turned to the inspector and said flatly, "This isn't a code issue. It's a crime scene I watched from the porch, coffee going cold, as hazmat workers in white suits pack the asbestos into sealed barrels. Cleanup cost? $4,200. I paid it myself, printed the invoice, and mailed it to Linda with a note. Consider this the price of desperation." 2 days later, Ron, her friend from the HOA board, resigned for personal reasons. His brother-in-law's business issued a public statement claiming the truck was stolen. No one believed it. By Friday, the district attorney added new charges to Linda's file: conspiracy, property destruction, witness intimidation. Her lawyer stopped taking her calls. Her empire was cracking. I thought that was the end of it. But late one afternoon, I looked out the window and saw a familiar white Lexus idling in my driveway. Linda had come herself, and this time, she wasn't here to bluff. She sat in her car for a full minute before rolling down the window. Just 2 inches, enough to speak but not enough to risk eye contact. Her perfect hair was gone, replaced by a tight ponytail and sleepless eyes. $300,000, she said flatly. Cash. You walk away clean. I leaned on my truck, arms crossed. "You don't have that kind of money." Her hands gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. "I have connections. Friends who still owe me. Take the deal, Dawson, before this gets worse." "You don't have any friends left," I said quietly, "and nothing left to threaten me with." That's when she broke. "You think you deserve that house? You? Some washed-up soldier with a limp? That property should have been mine." Her voice cracked, venom spilling into the cold air. Then she froze, eyes locked on the small body cam clipped to my jacket. "You're recording this. Every conversation on my property gets documented," I said. "You taught me that." She slammed the car into reverse and tore down the road, gravel spraying. That recording changed everything. And by the next morning, her empire was in ashes. By morning, that recording was everywhere. Linda's voice, that hateful rant about how I didn't deserve Ravenwood, went viral. Within 24 hours, the district attorney filed new charges: bribery, extortion, and witness tampering. Her empire collapsed overnight. The HOA board resigned. The community she'd ruled through fear finally saw her for what she was. A month later, the Lake Marin Shores HOA dissolved completely. When her trial came, I didn't celebrate. I just told the truth. So did everyone else she'd ever hurt. Neighbors, contractors, even her former friends. Linda pled out 18 months probation, $15,000 restitution, and a permanent ban from real estate. She moved to Florida. No apology, no goodbye. That spring, Ravenwood was finally complete. The oak staircase gleamed again. The lake shimmered like it was forgiving us both. I started a scholarship in my grandmother's name for local trade students chasing their own one day. The first recipient? Elena's daughter, who wanted to be an electrician. The house that almost got demolished became a place for second chances. Workshops, art shows, community nights. No HOA, no fear, just neighbors again. Most mornings I sit on the dock with my coffee and whisper, "We did it, Grandma." What about you? What's the worst thing an HOA or a power-hungry neighbor ever tried to pull on you? Drop your story in the comments. The wildest one gets featured next week. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because some fights are worth watching to the end.